Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. I'm back. You're going to love this episode with Carol Shih, one of the co-founders of Qode Space, Code with a Q, one of the fastest growing, leading e-commerce Shopify retail web development agencies in the country, from right here in Long Beach in the LBC. But you're also going to love just Carol's energy, her enthusiasm for life, her passion for her business, her self-awareness, and her belief in her own superpowers as a woman, and in particular as an Asian woman. And you'll dive into the story with us as we converse kind of from her entire journey, from her childhood through to what she's doing today here in Los Angeles. And you'll understand why it's so important that she bring along others, that she kind of amplify every voice that she can, that she put a hand out and help others kind of get up the ladder and break through the various ceilings that have been put in place societally and in our business structures to kind of keep really talented, hardworking people like Carol kind of at a certain level. And she's broken through all those. She is a self-described barrier breaker. I know you are going to enjoy this episode and learn from her and the wisdom that she shares as much as she and I did having the conversation for you. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. This is the show where I get to talk with the most creative and aspirational entrepreneurial thinkers of our era. And today, I'm super excited to be joined by Carol Shih. Carol is the founder at Qode Space and so much more. But first, before we get into all of that, let me tell you a little bit about her before we actually get to meet her. So Carol is a trailblazer in the e-commerce, Shopify, and technology worlds, co-founding Qode Space, which is a web development agency dedicated to uplifting minority and female developers. She's also a senior partner with the brand consulting agency Major Futures, after a career that covered the spectrum of revenue growth, client services, and operations. She's got more than a decade of experience managing enterprise brands and has a deep understanding of the e-commerce workflow, of which, by the way, I don't understand at all, so this is going to be fantastic. And her mission is really not just to help her clients' businesses grow, but while doing that, to foster greater diversity and inclusivity inside the technology industry, which Lord knows we need. From overcoming many personal challenges, obviously just being an entrepreneur, being a mom, building a company that prioritizes quality, community, and purposeful collaboration, Carol's journey is all about breaking barriers and building a more equitable future in tech, while also being an amazing partner to her husband and a mom to her children. She's a shining example, in my humble opinion, of the fullness of both the opportunities and the challenges of leading and living in today's increasingly entrepreneurial world. Carol, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, my friend. It's so great to share this conversation with you and kind of tie back all of our weird triumvirate of friendships between our super entrepreneurial friend, Amy Kim, and her husband, who does that sportscasting stuff, Yogi Roth. It's great to see you today.
So good seeing you, Rob. I've been so excited to join you on this podcast. I mean, you and I have been social media friends, and we've been just commenting on each other's posts for quite some time. So thank you for having me, and thank you for your kind intro.
No, my pleasure. It's always a great pleasure to be able to tie off any of these quote unquote online relationships and turn them into in real life, right? And as you pointed out off air, we have actually met each other once in real life. But it was a very brief interlude at one of Yogi's film premieres, which in and of itself is just a spectacle. And it was a fun connection. But I've been fascinated with you ever since then, honestly, just because of the way you live and because of the way you lead. And so we're gonna give you an opportunity to talk to us about all of that today. And the first question I want to jump into right away, because this is part of our shared history that we discovered online as you traveled a little bit in this last year. But I personally, this is just my opinion, so you can disprove this if you'd like, but I feel like you were either born an entrepreneurial thinker in Taiwan, or you learned it somewhere very early on. So I want you to answer that, but also I feel like you have kind of applied entrepreneurial principles to making a life for yourself beyond Taiwan, which is here in Los Angeles now. So let's talk about that. Like, you were born and raised in Taiwan. Ooh. Were you born an entrepreneur? Or is this all a crazy serendipitous journey?
Can someone be born entrepreneurial? I think that's like the most important question.
Right. That is a great
it's like
question.
A check off, right?
Right.
I would say yes, because so first I was born in Taiwan and I was raised in Australia.
Okay.
So I'm dual citizenship, and I think this is a fairly common thing in Asia, because as a small country in Taiwan, a lot of times a lot more wealthier families, they will try to obtain another citizenship for obviously political reasons. And my family was very business-like, and I think that's a very Asian type of culture, where they bring their kids to another country. And in my case, my parents just kind of left my brother and I in Australia in different foster homes, and just said, one of you guys are going to get the citizenship and we're going to go back home. And so very early on, we learned to be very independent, to live in a foreign country, in a foreign household.
Yeah.
I was there from kindergarten all the way to second grade. Then I moved in with my parents. So, and my parents, all I remember them, and I'm my mom is single mom in my teen years, and it's a big influence in my life, because all I remember her, and I still do now, is that she's an entrepreneur. She's a business owner first, and a mother second. I will not go into the trauma that I've had.
No, that's right. That could be a whole other podcast, right?
Right. But the question you asked is whether or not I was born entrepreneurial. I think that is where it came from. I learned by observing so much of how she interacts and how she builds relationships. And I think that because I moved out of Taiwan on my own when I was 19, I came here to Australia. I went to an international American school in Taiwan, hence my accent is more American. I mean, the Australian accent does come out when you give me enough tequila.
Okay, now we know that. I was going to ask there's a secret key there. I knew that was coming.
So yeah, I think when I came to the States, and again, it was putting another uncomfortable position where I speak the fluent language, but I don't know anything about the culture besides my GPA and my SAT scores. And I came here with a stack of cash, because that's what Asians do. They have a stack of cash, don't know how to use anything. And I was put in a situation where I have to lean on my neighbors and my relationships and my friends, right? And so that kind of is the core of how I start my company, is first, learning my weaknesses. I know I don't know the culture. I don't know the, whether it's political climate or culture or whatever that's going on that needs to sustain your life. I need to lean on my community to support me. Hence the reason why my company right now starts with quality, ends with community, because I have to.
Right.
And so a lot of them is situational, in my opinion, of how I become an entrepreneur. But a lot of them is inherited. For sure.
No, 100%. This is our opportunity to talk in free flowing conversation versus our social media DM snippets. But because we've exchanged messages about this before, so it was like 2003 to 2008 that I worked and lived intermittently, but worked primarily focused in Taiwan, and with the partner that was now listening to your story. Boy, his story was so similar. So again, kind of business oriented, focused parents in Taiwan. A mom, effectively, by the time I met him he was in his mid 20s. They were effectively separated, but never get divorced. Right. And mom was very politically involved, but also just very entrepreneurial. Dad ran the big company businesses in the South. And they sent him to American school in Japan. And the third partner of our partnership in that investment banking business was essentially an Indian guy born and raised in Calcutta, but were really raised in Tokyo in Japan. So we used to joke Bubai was basically a Japanese guy wrapped in an Indian wrapper. But
kid.
Yeah, they became best buddies at like 14 as essentially boarding school students at the American school in Tokyo. And devoid of their parents being in their lives, right? And then eventually like citizenship in Japan, et cetera, et cetera. And then I meet David, Chuang was his name. I meet David here in the US, similar path to you. He was like, okay, I want to go study in the US. In his case, he wound up in Colorado. And we randomly crossed paths. But then I spent like 5 years essentially as like the big brother uncle to these two guys in this business relationship because I was in my like middle to later 30s, and I was the white guy, right? But I learned so much, like so intimately about the cultural norms, the cultural realities, the history, the deep history of Taiwan, obviously as a country, its relationship with mainland China, all that stuff. I learned it was like getting like a firsthand, advanced level history class from these young guys, but then also layer in the social anthropology and the cultural aspects that then when I run across someone like you, it all seems so familiar. Right.
Right. We call ourselves the third culture kids. And there's quite a handful of us. And I think that they all usually surrounds of military kids or business kids or missionary kids. So those are the three types that we grow up with, because those are the kids where parents have to uplift their lives, move to another country, but then they know their kids still have to speak English as language. They throw them into American school, but it's in a complete different country. So it's very interesting. And I still feel like, even though I have a lot of friends here, the one that truly knows me are the ones that I grew up in middle school.
Okay.
Because we have the same core where we're always confused wherever we're at, and people ask, "Hey, where are you really from?" And I go, "I don't know. What do you mean? I have 2 passports, 1 green card. I've lived in multiple different countries. I did 2nd grade in 3 different countries. Which ones do you want to know about?"
Right.
So, yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, like you literally are, to use a trite phrase, like you're that citizen of the world kind of. But that I had never heard that phrase, like third culture kids. That's fascinating.
Yeah, TCK.
Right. I got to ask this. This wasn't in the scope of questions, but I'm going to ask now. Now I'm just curious. Like, so how did out of that journey, right? Like I show up at 19, I don't know anything but my GPA and my SAT score. Like why Southern California? I think if I read the bio, you went to Long Beach State. So like, how do you wind up like there?
Oh, that's a good question. So I was trained as a kid to be a pianist. So as an Asian kid, you're always have your parents' goal to hit. So I played piano since I was 5. And I actually had the chance to even interview at Juilliard. And I was all my entire childhood, all I remember, you can ask my childhood friends, I was always practicing piano. All the kids are out playing. I always have to be on the piano. And finally, I did one Top Nation and Top 5 in my city. And I remember I looked at my mom, and that was the first time that I told her, I was like, I don't think this is what I want for the rest of my life. And she looked at me, she's like, well, then what do you want to do? And that was the time you apply for college. And I knew it has to be America because that's where all your friends go. And that's another thing I think it's very troubling is that you're making a 19, 18-year-old decide the rest of their lives.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, that whole part, like
crazy.
that, yeah. And that's also that's
a whole,
there's the American culture part, like that's obviously
Correct.
very different, but like that little experience part is similar, right? And I've got a niece now who just started her junior year this last week, and her mom was like obsessed all summer. I love her mom. She's like family by choice sister, but her mom was like obsessed this summer with college and college tours and college choices and all this. And I was like, and I'm quietly behind her going, hey, my daughter, your buddy, like Riley, like your role model. I was like, she like made her choice, went to a school, got there, realized like a year into it, she hated it. And it was a terrible cultural choice. And then wrote me a letter from London, like studying abroad, going like, can I transfer and go to a different school? And like, I was like, so you're going to be okay. Cause look at her. She's doing fine.
Right.
I was like, you're going to be, but so to your point, that's even more like extenuating circumstances. Cause you're looking at this from afar going, I don't know, like, I guess Southern California, like America. Okay.
I'm not going to lie to you. It came down to which basketball team I like the most. I'm not going to lie. My brother went to Boston and he was a huge Celtics fan.
Okay.
And I remember when I was in sophomore in high school, I did a solo trip with a friend. Actually, it was a friend, but more solo. And I went through church friends to visit different cities in America because I knew I needed to visit the country before I go there.
Before you
but
made
I was
a
in
choice.
New York, I did Boston, and we went there around winter time. And that was when I was like, I am not.
You're like, this sucks.
To East Coast. Yeah. And I came to America, like California, and I was a big fan of Lakers. And it really came down to which school am I going to pick? And I remember I got into an East Coast school and I got into a couple of Cal States. And I would go, well, Cal State's cheaper It has a beach in the name, Long Beach.
Right.
Should be pretty good.
Awesome.
And Google wasn't the most advanced at the time. So I remember I came here. It was a funny story because I Googled Long Beach. And the only thing that came up of Long Beach, and I already got accepted. I convinced my mom I was going to go. We paid for everything, and I was packing my bags. And then I Googled it. I should have done that before. And I remember it was like, Warren G, Snoop Dogg,
right,
Gang Bang, like,
LBC.
And LBC, yeah.
Right.
And then I go, what did I do? What am I doing, right? And I remember the first couple of weeks I came here, and it was very scary. My freshman year was frightening. I got bullied. I had a really bad living situation. My mom didn't give me enough, and there was no help, right? I was applying.
No, you're on your own.
My mom doesn't read English. So I just applied for everything. I didn't get into the dorms. I had to live with some random people that I found on Facebook at the time. And they took advantage of me, made me pay more, live in a small space. And I remember there was a girlfriend that goes, hey, do you want to go to In-N-Out? And I go, what is that? It doesn't sound right. In-N-Out.
Sounds like a strange place. Do we stay when we go, or do we just go in?
Do you go out? Yeah. There's a lot of things. I didn't get it. And then she walks me to this very dark parking lot. And then she goes, shotgun. And
you're like, what are you?
Excuse my language. I'm going to shit my pants.
Right.
Because I thought we were going to get shot at.
Right.
And so I pulled my girlfriends. First of all, moral of the story is I'm a very good friend. I pulled my friends and I ducked down. Because in my head, I thought.
She's like, I just was asking if you wanted to sit in the front seat or not.
Sit in the front
while
seat.
We go get hamburgers.
How would I know?
Of course.
That shotgun means in front. And from then on, my nickname for the entire freshman year was Shotgun, which again comes with another derogatory term that I got, shotgun wedding, right?
Right.
So anyway, that was like, yeah.
Goodness.
So there was so many slang stories that I didn't know about. And that actually got me a lot of friends because I thought, you know what? I just don't know what I don't know. I'm just going to be myself.
Good for you.
And I made a lot of friends, very diverse friends, because they're just like, this Asian girl's funny. Like, she does not care.
No, you are, as I said, and I said that, like, it's one of the things I said in your opening, right? Is like, I was as an online observer, like, I was just fascinated by your confidence and your wit. And I didn't apply this word, but I would now, right? Kind of your resilience. Right. So it's funny. I was going to ask you a question, which I'm now not going to ask you because essentially you've already talked about it. Right. This idea you describe in your own bio, like as a barrier breaker. Right. And I was going to kind of like pull on that thread a little bit, but you've just described, like, you've been breaking barriers, the barriers of cultural barriers, the business barriers now, like finding your way, just the barriers, literally just trying to figure out life as a young person, as a really young person, like in multiple different countries, cultures, on your own. I mean, it does kind of answer the question, like maybe not by like traditional business sense, like you weren't born an entrepreneur, but you were definitely born into a universe that required you to become, whether we want to call it innovative or, industrious or self-dependent or self-reliant, like, and those are all things that I believe describe people who are entrepreneurial thinkers. So ultimately, like your growing up story is amazing because like it got you. We just got to Long Beach in this story, and you've already proven like so many different levels of why you. It's just fascinating. It's awesome. All right, so we're gonna start talking about Qode Space in a little bit here because that's an amazing journey. We got to talk about that, but I want to dip into this. Kind of from an LA centric standpoint, right? So LA, Long Beach kind of standpoint. So you find your way here, you're learning the culture along the way. Now let's fast forward. We're adults. You're an entrepreneur. You're a business person here in the community. Like, we both know that LA is obviously one of the top 2 or 3 most diverse cities in the world. Yet inside of kind of the entrepreneurial economy, as I call it, the macro entrepreneurial world, it tends to exist in like very specific silos. Like either it's like you're involved in like a very specific geographic silo, like you never leave your area, or the entrepreneurial economy is very culturally siloed, right? And it tends to be just like a bunch of college educated white dudes. Right. And yet and we're going to talk about it later because you're going to tell us about Major Future and Major Asians and all this cool stuff, the communities that you're part of leading. But like, how have you learned the person that you are when you landed in London? Like, how have you learned to navigate this? How have you learned as a Taiwanese woman who has literally kind of created her entire life path? How have you learned to navigate inside this entrepreneurial economy, this entrepreneurial world of Los Angeles, where it seems on the surface it'd be super easy because it's so diverse, but I think it's super hard because it's so diverse sometimes.
I mean, I think you touched a really good point. It's when you say, how did I learn that path? Honestly, a lot of times as a young adult, when you're in college, you don't know who you are yet. And I think that was part of my my own identity that I have not discovered. But what I've noticed is I've always, if I'm in an organization, I always somehow become one of the leaders. I was either in student council or somehow I got pushed to be a president. And I was president of Taiwanese Student Association. I didn't even want to be there, but here I am. They're just like, why don't you talk, Carol? And that's kind of how I start to realize, like, okay, I think I have a role in this. And I've been like this since I was middle school and high school. So I accepted the fact that I knew that I was going to be in front of the line.
Okay.
And as I'm figuring that out, I also have a very big goal in mind when I came to the United States. I knew that I wasn't going to go home anymore. I knew that I was not going to go back to Taiwan.
Okay.
And that was something that I knew the minute I was on the airplane to United States. I told myself, I'm staying here. I don't care what's going to happen. I'm going to stay here. And when I have that goal in mind, that's all I look for in when I'm looking for my major. And I remember I was talking to my counselor. I'm like, what is the best major I can get in order for me to get a working visa? Because I need to get a working visa and obtain that and change that into a green card. Right. And she's like, well, the broadest major that you can get a job to obtain a green card is either engineering or so basically in tech, or it's going to be doctorate. And I'm like, not the study type.
Yeah, don't want to be a doctor.
Not the typing type. Yeah, exactly. Not the typing type. She goes, what about marketing or communication? I go, well, I can do communication. Right. So I double majored communication and marketing. And with those two majors combined, it's very broad for me to look for a working sponsor visa. And that's how I stumbled upon digital e-commerce.
Interesting. But I love that, like you knew, I'm going to stay. Like, I'm going here to build my life. And then that unleashes like a series of very obvious decisions, right? And goals that say like, okay, so I'm using this system to get to get this visa, to get that green card, to like put myself in position to essentially, like from a young age.
Everything aligned towards that. I'm a big planner. Everything aligned towards that. Everything, if I want to be a president of Taiwanese Student Association, I knew that was something that was needed to open some doors for me in the future. Yeah. And I still think of that way today. I say yes to opportunities because I know I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, but I know if I say yes to this, it might open more doors for me in the future. And I have that mindset since I was a really young age, especially coming here to a foreign country. Yeah. I don't know what I don't know.
Right. No, I love that. And that helps me understand some of the underlying confidence that you just feel when, again, like we talk about voice, like both voice and then like online voice, like your voice online is just confident, like just the how you communicate your thoughts, your opinions, your anecdotes and stories about your own life, like normal day-to-day stuff. Like you are very self-assured is maybe even a better way to say it. And that now explains a lot of that. That's awesome. All right. So, before we get into Qode Space, a community question, right? So we just touched on a little bit. You're part of a community, and I don't know anything about it, so please explain it all to us. That is either the community itself is called Major Asians, or that's the naming of the community, which is something else. But talk to us about that, and I would love for you to talk to us about it in the context of what it is and what its purpose is and all that. But I am also going to ask you like the obvious white guy to Asian woman question, right? Is are in Los Angeles specific, right? Are Asian entrepreneurs, Asian business owners facing more unique challenges in today's entrepreneurial world that like the rest of the folks just don't understand? And if so, like, let's talk about that. Let's help people understand that a little bit.
Oh man, that could be like a 5-hour.
That's all right. I'll try and keep us on time.
So very good question about Major Future and Major Asian. So how it started legitimately was because I actually said yes to joining. It was Amy, actually. It was Amy Kim, Yogi's wife. She says, hey, Carol, there is an Asian founder network in Santa Monica. Would you like to go with me? And it's a networking event. And I'll go, sure, let's go. And as I went to this event, I found two other Asian entrepreneurs in the group, and they belong to a branding organization called Major Futures.
Okay.
And we hit it off right away. They found out what I do. They explained to me that Major Futures is a firm in New York that surrounds branding identity. So they are a branding firm, and they have around 17, 18 senior partners, and they're seeking somebody like me to kind of fill in that life cycle, because my expertise is in e-com and web development. And so they're like, why don't you join us and talk to our senior partners, senior managers and whatnot. And I did, and they loved me, and they go, why don't you join our organization? And to me, I was like, well, this is not too much of a different work that I'm doing. I'm already promoting Qode Space, which is a web development agency. Yep. And if I can also upsell branding, that really completes the life cycle.
Sure, yeah.
Because a lot of entrepreneurs think, oh, I just need to build a website. If I build a website, then money will come. Right. No, you need to tell a story. Unfortunately, North America is all about telling a good content story.
Very much.
And so I learned a lot from Major Futures. And within that, the two Asian founders, which I met in the Asian Founder Network, said, well, Carol, there's opportunity in Asia. And my background was also Alibaba. So prior to Qode Space and after a digital agency, I actually worked at Alibaba for a year. So I have a lot of expertise in cross-border. And so they're like, well, Carol, what do you think about the trend about North America brands entering into China, entering into Korea, and vice versa, where these brands want to move into the North American market? There's a huge opportunity there. Let's form Major Asians. So we're a branch outside of Major Futures, focusing on Asian brands and exposing them and expanding their network into the North American market.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I think there is a huge trend that is about, I think it's already here, as you guys can tell, all the Netflix show we're watching, right? Squid Games, Korean pop, Korean beauty, BTS. Like when we were younger in the 90s, like Korean music was very underground. Like not a lot of Americans know anything about Korean music, but now everyone's dancing to BTS. Like, I'm just like, how do you know who Blackpink is? And everyone's talking about Korean beauty. And you start to notice the mainstream of beauty products are starting to use like materials we've been using for hundreds of years, like gua sha. Those are things that we've been using for years, but it's now trending back because people are starting to notice like, well, the East Asia techniques, it's very intriguing. They no longer call us just like the Oriental or foreign. It's more of a trend. It's hot now. And so when you see that trend going, you also start to see a movement in the Asian founder networks, especially in the entrepreneur. We start to realize people are noticing our culture, whether it's Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Cambodia, Thailand. We're starting to come up. So entrepreneurs starting to catch on. We are promoting more of our product, more of our culture, start talking about more of us. And of course, there's a lot of hardships because it's not like we just existed last couple of years. We've been here. We've been here in the United States for years. But we've always been, whether the minority citizen, right? That we're just kind of under the radar.
You're like, well, this is all terrible language that we didn't choose, but like the model minority.
There it is. Minority.
Right, yeah.
And
which is just, that's like world, cringe, so cringe just to think that that's
exactly
how we, right?
And in the tech world, and what I've noticed is that a lot of the Asian people are always middle management. We're great. We work very hard. And that's what I've seen is that our glass ceiling, or they call it bamboo ceiling, land, which is also derogatory, ends right in middle management. We can go up to the VPs, but we will never be having the seat
Yeah.
in the big seats,
And
right?
so
And that's changing.
So like, here's you and Amy, go back a couple of steps, right? Here's you and Amy essentially going to a networking, you know, community group that is going to be Asian entrepreneurs, right? And so it's a little bit of like, hey, let's network with people like us, but also like, hey, let's go hang out with people like us who probably are experiencing the same travails and struggles and hardships as entrepreneurs here in LA, like as we are. So let's go be with our community, right? And then while there and now a part of this community, you've grown to like, you're growing to understand that, like, wait a minute, like there's power in our community and not just inside of our community anymore. Like there's collective power that if we all, so now it goes from like a support group kind of vibe to more of like an empowerment group kind of vibe. Like, hey, wait a minute, like we are, like your shit might be in demand and our, like we're on the come up, as you said, like generally speaking. And so why not like lean on each other's best practices and best stories and inspiration and support of each other to help grow our individual companies or brands? Or, I mean, and you're successful. We're going to talk about Qode Space here in a minute. Amy's very successful with Kindtail, but that's fascinating to me. So like, it's like this idea that you guys gathered in part to just find other like-minded people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the journey of like the experience together is this realization of, oh shit, like maybe it's our moment. Like maybe we're coming into our era and we can help each other. That's got to be pretty. And then out of that comes like Major Futures as an agency and then Major Asians as a focus. Like, does it feel like kind of overdue in some ways? Like, do you feel like why is it taking this long to happen? Or are you just excited that we're here in a good moment?
I never think it's overdue. I always think it's right timing.
There you go.
Whether it's coming at a time where I'm ready to take on, even if it came a couple of years ago, I probably wouldn't be able to take it. And I think it was the right mindset. And I remember very clearly, it was a Lunar New Year gathering.
Okay.
So it was already a Chinese holiday.
Right.
So already when you win, and it's so comforting to, and like you said, it's more like a support group. It's just like, oh, you feel the same way.
Sure.
And it's so funny because majority of the people there, first of all, we have the same culture. Our parents are all very strict. They all want us to go to Ivy League,
right? Which
means majority of the Ivy League people that graduated ended up having one of those very big jobs.
Sure.
Google, the Yahoos, the Amazons of the world, right?
Yeah.
And then we realize we don't want to be there anymore because we're never going to climb high enough. Then we start our own business. So it's like a Venn diagram. We just all be like, oh, me too, me too, me too. Right. And then you have trauma with your family. Then
that's culture. A whole, right. Yeah.
And it's just so easy to click and connect. And I think that's also how Amy and I became good friends.
That's awesome.
It's to understand like the struggles that we have is already 10 times fold than the normal entrepreneurial trial for those who grew up here in the States.
No, because there is that whole layer. And it's funny because when she and I got to know each other, and then she had her on the show after some period of time after he had been on my show. And he and I knew each other. I knew him before her, before they famously met on that airplane flight that they love to tell that story about. Right. But I remember like meeting her as an entrepreneur and thinking to myself, like she was at a juncture in her own career and in her evolution of Kindtail of like kind of feeling alone sometimes. Right. And kind of going through that, like, I'm different. I feel like I'm out of the loop. I'm like, I had this career that was like, everybody was like, oh my God, that's a great career. Designer, big auto industry companies, like all these cool brands. And I chucked it to basically like reinvent my life because I'm not happy, right? Like, and then you, like you said, that runs up against all these cultural expectations inside of Asian families, which I've learned about over the decades from various friends. And it's fascinating. Yeah. Like, I mean, I love that became part of the root of your friendship. And then also, again, just to see both of you thriving as an extension of this. So, okay. Tell us about Qode Space. First of all, why code with a Q? Why code with a Q?
Oh, love that question. There's like a leading up to this. Why code with Q? So it goes back to my CTO and I. So first of all, we had a couple of new owners. I actually came in as a third owner with very little equity just to support the company with client facing. So it was originally two developers. And they're coders and they're developers. And they started the company and they go, Carol, we love to code and we know how to code. We're very good at it, but we don't know how to talk to people. And we know you know how to talk to people.
Carol, you run for Taiwanese Student Association. You're the talker.
Why don't you be the face, right? And I was working at Alibaba at the time, and I go, well, I don't know, sure, I will give you my friend's connection. I'm always about sharing network, right? Yeah. And so I actually brought them quite a bit of business. And what happened in the next couple of years was that they couldn't handle the business. It was too much. As much as you know how to code, for one thing, you still have to learn to look at P&L,
right?
Understand how to manage people. Yeah. You also have to understand how to do finances and operations. So I start taking up more and more, and that was when we kind of hit pandemic. And so I take over. The two original owners left, and then I brought in another CTO that was also a mom and minority, she's Persian, and the company starts to kind of go uphill.
And let's shout her out. Your partner now.
Yeah. My partner's name is Tasha. She is my partner in crime and the most badass mom possible. And
we love Tasha.
I just want you to know, Tasha can, and as a mom, and I always will tell people this, hire a mom,
100%.
Right? If you see a gap in their careers and their resume, it's because she's just taking a break to come back stronger. Never estimate that.
Just hire moms. Just hire moms in general.
Yeah, just all moms. And I do hire all women. And the Q in Qode Space, what happened to us is we always focus on quality. That never changed as a core value and mission. Is that the reason why we put code into as a Q is mainly focused on one. Not a lot of people understand what coding means. Right? Even till this day, one of the biggest problems I face when I talk to people is, well, can you just do that in $500? Or can you just copy and paste that?
Yes, no.
Well, and I will always joke sarcastically say, how about this? How about you copy and paste and I'll pay you to do that?
Right.
And then if you break it, you pay me double to fix it.
Boom.
Right? Because that's not how coding works, right? And it's very complicated. And I always describe it like it's building a house. You need to have a good foundation. You need to bring the right contractors. If your materials are shitty, then your foundations are going to be shitty. And so Qode Space comes first when it comes to quality. And we still use that as one of our missions to emphasize transparency. We don't charge you any rate just because we think it's supposed to be that way or just to be competitive. So we want a lot more trust and relationships because we always say, well, this is better for your website if you do it this way and not to overcharge you.
Would you say that like this, the focus on quality and then this just kind of authentic communication side, would you say that's what sets you guys apart, or is there something else that sets you apart?
We're also women-owned.
Okay, there we go.
So that's very different in the technology world. I think there's only a few of us, and we don't do the sexy marketing stuff. We legitimately are, and we always say we're a full team of nerds, except me. I'm the.
You're just kind of nerdy. Yeah. You're just a little nerdy.
Yeah, I'm a little. I will always be like, that's a great question, Tasha. Can you answer that?
That's great. Okay, so the focus on diversity and female empowerment. Quality. That's really what's setting you apart.
Yes, that's our big for sure.
So why? Let's go back a section. Why focus on that? Like, why not? Like, you kicked ass. You built your life. You built your life in Southern California. Like, we're tired from just the journey to get to the point of starting the business, right? You built your career. You hit the bamboo ceiling. As shitty as that sounds, right? Like, and why not? So why not just take this business, start growing it, and just take yours? Like, just paper your own bank account. Why care about empowering other women? Why care about hiring and surrounding yourself with women and moms? Like, why does that matter?
Well, when I was working in corporate, I work for a lot of big fashion brands. And I think that was the biggest struggle, is that I don't see a lot of me in the industry. A lot of my mentors and everything just doesn't look like me. They're amazing people, but they're just not my race, not my gender. And it was very difficult for me to see how far I can go because I don't see someone that looks like me. And for that reason, I start to help out a lot more immigrants, and I helped out a lot of entrepreneurs that want to go somewhere, but just doesn't know where to go. And I kind of got pushed to this position where it's like, you can do this, Carol. Why don't you head this department for us and be the face? And I start to feel more and more confident when I start picking up the mic, doing more podcasts like this and talk about my journey and do more LinkedIn activities and really just focusing our branding and understand like, hey, there's not a lot of us in the industry, but we can't totally do it. Let's not hide what you really want to do because of your culture, because of family pressure, because of whatever it is that's holding you back. If that's really what you want to do, you should try it out, because I tried it out. And when I did that, and I purposely, and that's another thing of our core value is, you said it earlier, it's quality, it's community, it's being purposeful in who we hire, who we talk to, who you ask to be clients, and also transparency. And when I live by this,
sorry to interrupt. Is the
no,
e-commerce kind of Shopify developer space? Is it like all dudes? Is it all bros?
Most bros, yeah.
Yeah.
Majority, 80-90%. Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. Marketing has a lot more women.
Sure.
And they're amazing, amazing women. I actually won the nominees of Amazing Women in E-commerce, AWIE award, which is a phenomenal what's it called? It's a program set up by Yapo. Amazing, and I could get to find more of us, right? But ideally I would still like to see more minorities pushing towards this. I want more of us in the industry for sure.
No, I love that.
And yeah. And Tasha's background is also very impressive. She used to work at SpaceX as a quality assurance, and she managed tons of engineers. I always say the engineers are deadly afraid of her because she's such a good QA. And I was like, I want you in my team because I don't need a coder to lead the team. I need somebody who knows how to manage coders.
Right.
And it was just a match make in heaven.
And if you've literally overseen like getting rockets up and then back down again, right? Like you could probably help people build Shopify websites.
Probably. Yeah, and she worked with.
That's awesome. Does she just now that we're on the Tasha front? Just curious, is she remote, or is she here in LA too, or is she somewhere else?
We're all remote.
Okay.
So thanks to pandemic era, we almost got ourselves an office, but literally right before we put the down payment in, pandemic came, we're like, maybe not a good idea.
Thank you, lockdowns. Fantastic. Okay, that's a great. Like, hey, here's a positive spin from the global pandemic that wiped out millions of people. Like, it kept us from making a terrible office decision. Put that money back in the pocket. Good for you.
Pandemic was really, really good for the e-com.
I honestly, and this is not dismissing obviously the terrible tragedy of the health effect of it on a global scale, but I have said since it happened, right, that we'll look back on this on many levels, socially, culturally, business-wise, for sure. 100%. And it will have been kind of two things at once. I believe it will have been proven to be like the intermission between two great acts of a great play, but like the intermission that we needed, where we kind of got our shit together and like went, oh, wait a minute. What do we, like, instead of just stumbling forward to the next 50 or 75 years, we could do it differently. And like, okay, cool. And then it also will wind up being, and this is your example, like the accelerant. Right. So like work from home was already a thing. Like 19% of the world's like population worked from home in 2018. Like it's just that the pandemic happened and then that just made all of this like wrestling over these like, well, this is the way it always used to be versus this is the way it could be. Like now we've just kind of we're in the wrestling intermission and we're coming out of this realizing that you could build a wildly successful business with a bunch of women and some moms and do it all remotely, working from your homes or your coffee shops or your WeWorks or your whatever, and not be encumbered by the expenses and cultural norms that we existed in the prior 75 years. Like so
company culture changed completely after the pandemic because you get to build something online and the responsibilities of your employees showing up is very different as well as how it used to be, right? I think back in the day, I had a mentor that taught me this. And it was so funny. She says, you don't always work for yourself and get the work done. You need to make sure the right people see you working. because if they don't see you working, they don't know that you're working. So a lot of times it created a culture of acting. Right? Oh, my boss is coming and you have to start you're shopping this entire time until he came over to your desk. All right. We all know that. Right.
100%.
So, but then when you're now online, you don't have somebody hovering over you. You don't have a micromanager. So what does that mean when it comes to showing up? And I set that rule very clean for my team. I said, you can work at the beach for all I care. But if the client doesn't complain about you, you show up to your meetings and you're present for that 30 an hour.
Right.
Girl, you got it.
Professional, Professional, prepared, do the work, deliver results, to be productive.
Yeah.
Which as we're seeing in all the studies, like especially like at the macro, like big study level, like productivity is up. Right, like product, like
retention.
This, I mean, the next wave of this wrestling match will be the 4-day work week, right? Not because it's some mythical socialist, like Northern European thing, like no, but because it functionally works. Because I've been saying this since like 2010. Like no one in white collar working knowledge industry type work in the U.S. at least, no one's been putting in meaningful work on Fridays since like 2009. Like this has just not been a thing. Like I worked.
This is summer Fridays.
Right.
Summer Fridays means you're done and you're drinking. Like,
maybe you're getting a couple things done in the morning, but you're done by like 11. Right. Like so, if that's been true, then why not just focus people's work in 4 days? Allow them time to it's there's a study I read.
Smart.
Yeah. No, exactly. Right. So good for you. You're leading the next generation of business people to think differently. Again, to kind of come out of the pandemic as a benefit, right? As opposed to an inhibitor on what we're doing. All right. So before we leave Qode Space, because I know there's got to be a couple cool stories. I'm not going to ask you to like pick amongst your children all your favorite clients, but if there are one or two cool Qode Space client success stories that you could share, I'd love for people to hear about that.
I think, I read that question. So the one that I can think about is it's all very relational. And I think one of the qualities that I continue to tell myself, like, Carol, this is the reason why you have a successful company, is how I treat people. Whether they were a manager before and then they became a VP later, I always kept the same demeanor because I am continuing to be true to myself. So the best success story is when I grow with my clients, or at that point became friends. So I have clients back in the day when I was a account manager, like a little girl that does admin work, and we became very good friends. She then grew and became a VP at another company, and she left and I left, and I work at Alibaba. I now own my own company. We kept in touch in social media, just like how you and I, Rob.
That's awesome.
And a lot of my business come from that same network of people because they follow me on LinkedIn. They follow me on Instagram. They go, Carol, what are you doing? Oh, you're doing a web development agency?
Right.
Great. My company right now needs some development work. Can we talk? So my long-term clients were the ones that I used to work with back in the day when I was legitimately in the warehouse, ringing up
good for you
products for them. And so I continue to believe that I am not the kind of person that discriminates because you have a lower title.
Yeah.
It's more about how I'm going to treat you because you're a person. I'm treating you like a person, and you never know where they're going to go. And same thing with my partnerships that I deal with, whether it's in Qode Space, Major Asians, or anywhere else. I think I keep those relationships close because I continue want to see my friends grow, and they always bring me success as well.
I was going to ask you what you think makes you successful, but I think you just answered it. Right? I mean, like you're so I, as you know, in my social media, and it started on my LinkedIn a handful of years ago, or a couple years ago. But I literally used the title relationship capitalist for myself. Right. And I would argue that's what you are. Like, because all you just described, not minimizing it, actually amplifying it, what you just described as your own journey. And when I ask you a client success story, you point to a girl or a woman, a relationship you've had for decades. Right. Because you two have grown through your relationship together. Right. That is what makes you successful. Like, and yes, being the confident communicator when peers like in your peer group or in your cultural peer group weren't as confident to communicate, or being the more forthright person, happy to talk to people when you're surrounded by coders who are afraid of people. Those are attributes, but this appreciation of the human relationship, and the value of that, not being transactional, right?
Yeah.
That's the key. You'll love this. My dad, his famous saying, one of many things that he left me with, was treat everybody, no matter in the back room or the boardroom, the same. And when he told me that, I was like 19. I was beginning to work for him while I was still in university, and had no idea what that meant. Right. And until I was out in the field in the beginning of your career, like mine was sales and business development. So about 9-10 years doing that. And you would meet people across the whole spectrum of the company that you were selling something to. Right. And you'd meet the backroom guys or women, and the backroom people were the people that eventually got you to the boardroom people. Right. And quickly, within a couple of years, I figured out how, and I bet you have too, I'm curious your feedback, how few people actually do that. Like, so suddenly I was like, oh, not only was my dad giving me like a moral lesson of how to be kind to another human, but he was actually giving me like a competitive differentiator. Because what he didn't tell me was like, hey, go be nice, kind to the backroom person and the boardroom person the same, because very few other competitive people with you are also going to be nice to the backroom person and the boardroom person. So you wind up differentiating yourself.
Yeah. The people in the back room is the one that do most of the work.
Right?
So they're the one who's giving you the most insightful information.
100%.
So you're actually doing a better work if you're nicer to the people. It's like saying you see a person's true personality when you see how they treat a waiter, right, versus how they treat the front or CEOs.
Yeah, 100% true.
Because those are the people that's handling your food.
Yeah, no, I mean, right, exactly. Yeah, no, yes, that's the moral lesson, right? In what my dad used to say was that, but it's this idea. It also is a competitive differentiator, like, and I can see again why you built relationships. Okay, last question before we get into our last section. This is going to totally change it up on you. Is it important to you that your son sees you working as hard as you do and being as entrepreneurial as you are?
That was a good question that you had. I ponder upon this really long time. I don't think I want him to always see me working hard. I want him to notice that I try very hard to be in his life.
I love it.
I think that is more because I lack that in my own life.
Right.
I wish my mother could stop working for a minute and just hang out with me. And so I realized that you don't have much time with your kids. They say the days are long, years are short. So if I spend all my time, granted, that's just kind of how life is, because I'm in the peak of my career, I should dedicate more time. But that's also the reason why I'm with Qode Space, because I know I can work more efficiently with a very proficient team.
Yeah.
Right. So then I can spend more time. It's a cycle. Right. If I don't promote life work balance in my company, then I'm also telling my team that they don't have enough time for their family. So I've created an environment for myself, especially having a woman and a mother owner as a partner. She and I definitely talk to each other about, hey, I can't. Wednesday is my son's birthday.
Right.
You take that entire day off if you have to.
Yeah.
And my son noticed how much I value him as well.
That's
Mama's
awesome.
not working today. I'm turning off the computer. No cell phones. Just me and you, buddy. And that I feel like is more important because that's something I've always wanted.
That's awesome. Thank you for being so vulnerable there. The reality is you are exhibiting, right, for your son. Like you're living life as an entrepreneurial thinker, and he will grow up with an entrepreneurial parent. And I know his dad is a creative person, like from what I see online, that's awesome. But so he's going to grow up, and someone's going to ask him on a podcast like 30 years from now, like, hey, how come you do what you do the way you do it? And inevitably, it's going to be shaped by the same answers. What you're saying, though, and it's beautiful to hear it, right? And nothing against your mom, right? But the reality is, like, just like her life choices and her being entrepreneurial or business oriented and focused and affected you, right? And shaped you, both shaped you. And that means in the total sense of the word, like you're shaping your son. And so you're making these choices. That's really important. Also not surprising at all that that's your point of view, because it's super consistent with everything else the way you approach everything else that you do in your business and in your relationships and your network. That's awesome. Okay. So last section, these are like kind of practical steps. This is where you get to be kind of the mentor that you are, obviously, to a lot of different people. Give some cool kind of advice and something actionable so people can take it away. So two different sets of questions. This first one I'm focused on. You've talked a ton about the importance of being seen, right? Representation matters, right? So access, inclusivity, setting an example for others. So let's talk about this from the idea of women entrepreneurs or women of color entrepreneurs, even more specifically. What are 2 or 3 practical steps that women entrepreneurs or women of color entrepreneurs can take to try and navigate just the inherent challenges of specifically the technology industry?
I think being in minority women, we are taught in our culture to do it all. You need to be a mom, you need to be a daughter, you need to be a wife, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you better be the best. You better know what you're doing. You only have a short amount of time. Your eggs are dying. And there's always a time limit. And I think the biggest thing you need to do is to be self-aware of your weakness and your strength.
Self-awareness.
And I think, yes, self-awareness is huge, because if I think I can do it all, I would definitely fail because I'm putting all that on my own. So the minute I enter and put myself into this leadership position, I always say, I tell my team all the time, I am really, really bad at this.
That's awesome.
And I find a operations manager who's my assistant. She literally tackles me. And I will tell her, I'm like, you have full permission to yell at me when I don't get this done. Yeah. And I give her the power and I give her all the permission to be good at her job, because I know I'm not good at that part.
Self-awareness, surround yourself with others who would do the things that you're not good at.
Oh yeah. Let it go. You're not able to do it all. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are so bad at letting go because they're like, this is my baby. I want to do it all. I want to make sure that I know how to do the creative part. I want to know how to do the paid search. I want to know how to do this e-com. Yeah. Girl, you can't. You're a shoemaker. Go make shoes.
This has suddenly turned into a scene from Frozen. This is awesome. Just let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go. This is great.
Yeah.
I love it. No, that's super, super actionable. Okay. So last question then, because you've done this, you are good at this, you are really intentional about this. What are a couple of steps or tips, maybe tips, to how to foster a more inclusive and supportive company culture, like one that can help really kind of retain talent and help people grow?
Number 1, ask questions. Okay. Ask many questions, right? You and I were talking about boardroom versus backroom. Ask questions to both. Ask intentional questions. How can I be better? What do you look for? What are some things that you want as a work from home parent, right? How can I, in my power, make your position more successful? Those are important questions to have. I think once you have that question, number 2 is fix your process. I think if you don't, and I say this to probably every podcast, and I still live by it, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. This is James Clear.
Yeah.
Atomic
Habits. 100% true.
Right? You fix your process, because if you have a goal in mind and your goal does not match your system, it doesn't matter where your goal is at. And make sure your people understand where that's at. So number 1, ask questions. Yeah. Number 2, fix your process.
That's hugely important and so applicable to just about anybody. Carol, from Hollywood to Long Beach, this has been an absolute pleasure. This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
And such good, 100% energy, like I expected. You're a busy woman, so I know you're carving time out of the day to do this. Also, though, just for our audience sake, like, let's be honest, she's like the stand-up comic of podcast guests. Like, she's like coming to a podcast near you soon. So if you don't get a chance, if you get so excited by listening to her on this podcast, I'm 100% sure if you find and follow her, that she's going to show up on some other podcast like every week for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Rob. This is so fun. I mean, if you and I don't have a time limit, you and I would be talking
100%
for
true.
a couple more hours.
100%
so
true.
we definitely need to talk offline as well. But
No,
thank you so much for having me. This was amazing.
It's been a blast and a blessing. The insights you share are incredible. Your journey, your story in and of itself is a whole other conversation. Like, so that's just awesome to hear. And respectfully, we don't talk about women's age when we talk with women on the show, but I will say, like, you're still a young woman, comparatively speaking. So the exciting part is, like, there's a whole person between you and I, life-wise. And that just means that there's even more of this to come, and more maturity and more self-awareness, and then therefore more success. And the exciting part for me about your success is that you've built your life in such a way that it just naturally ripples out to everybody around you. So the positive ripple effect you're going to have on the lives of other entrepreneurs, other women, other people in your communities is exponential. And I'm pretty stoked to just be able to now watch that for the rest of our lives together. So thank you, my friend. It was great.
Thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate you.
Quickly before we close off, how can people find you, follow you, and or find and follow Qode Space, so that if we get some clients for you, we can make sure they can find you?
Yeah, you can always find me at qodespace.com. And again, that's QODESPACE space. Or you can look for me on Instagram. I'm very active. That's how Rob and I stay connected. My name is start with a C, but my Instagram starts with a K, because I started that when I was 5th grade and I never changed.
Barrier breaker.
KROLZ.
Yeah.
So,
I think I've still got an email address. I started when I was like 11. So
yes. Never give up.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.